session, and it was hype in the air. There was momentum. The young people came to deliberate and execute their presentations flawlessly, so it was fabulous. So we hope that you can go back and listen to it on Facebook on the Government of St. Lucia's NTN page. And today, if you're viewing live, welcome. There's going to be a very fabulous discussion. So within a couple of minutes, we're going to be starting here as we execute the second day of Youth Parliament 2025. Now, this discussion is very interesting, where we talk about the Police Powers Act and really what power should the police have, and to the extent the Minister of National Security. But we will let them present as we begin.
Today as youth of this nation. We thank you for the youth among us, in our communities and in our country. Lord, we pray for your wisdom above all to guide our hearts and mind. We pray that the youth be understanding of others as they seek to understand themselves. We pray that they will develop spiritual maturity as they draw closer to you day by day. We pray that you help them find purpose and meaning in their lives as they discover who they are and their eternity. We pray that they develop clarity of mind and not double-minded, focus on the goodness and through the journey of this life. We pray that the youth will grow into the fear of the Lord, walk in the Spirit, proclaim the gospel, and in all things glorify our Father. Amen.
Please be seated.
Announcements. Statements from ministers, from parliamentary secretaries. Bills. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers.
This act may be cited as the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Act 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for suspension standing order number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that standing order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many are of the opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers.
This act may be cited as the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Act 2023.
Madam President, Part 1 of the bill describes the designation of an escalated crime area, as well as the order for designation of an escalated crime area. Part 2 of the bill states the police powers for suppression of escalated crime. It gives the police power to stop a person, power to block a road or set up a cordon, power to require removal of vehicle or other article, power to access land or building, power to close a premise, power to give directions for control of firearms, resort and entertainment, and protection of police officers. Part 3 of the bill states the offenses for suppression of escalated crime and detention. Offense relating to public property, offense to trespass to public property, offense with respect to roads, offense with respect to assault, and detention of persons. Part 4 of the bill, Madam President, describes the arrangement with outside security forces, penalties, and regulations. Madam President, can you imagine living in a community where sound of sirens is a familiar lullaby, and the sight of police tape is a daily reminder that safety is a luxury you can no longer afford? This is not just a hypothetical scenario, but it's a lived reality for many of our citizens in St. Lucia, particularly in the most vulnerable communities. Madam President, let's go back 2 years ago to a year of chaos and crisis that rocked the foundations of St. Lucia. According to a post made on January 1st, 2024 by St. Lucia Times, it was revealed that there were a total of 75 homicides for the year 2023. This year will be remembered as a tragic chapter in our nation's history. To fully comprehend the gravity of this period, let me recount the staggering statistics. 3 lives lost to blunt force trauma, 9 to sharp objects, 1 to strangulation, an alarming 58 to gunshots, and 4 to police killings. These numbers not only represent lost lives, but shattered families, communities, and dreams. The impact of such devastation cannot be overstated. And let us not forget that the victims of this violence are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons, and daughters. They were our neighbors, our friends, and our colleagues, and our fellow citizens. As we reflect on the staggering loss of life and the terrible impact of crime on our communities, we must recognize that our failure to address this issue will have dire consequences. Moreover, we refuse to be held hostage by the fear of criminality. We must stand united and take decisive action to combat this scourge that threatens our way of life. The bill in discussion today is the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Act 2023, and it is an unwavering honor to be included in this debate. Madam President, yesterday the House government recommended increased surveillance and body cameras as means of mitigating the worst effects of this bill, such as abuse of power. I am wise enough to know that while representing and fully backing the government of St. Lucia, I could only ever fully vouch for myself. As for what future governments are capable of, as for what any bad actors within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force are capable of, I don't want to be naive, and I will not encourage the citizens of St. Lucia to be naive either. Realistically, if the government and police did surveillance, they are the government of St. Lucia's cameras and will mostly be used for crime prevention and prosecution. But no citizen should be naive in thinking that these cameras will serve as evidence for their own legal defense. Citizens and youth especially, since they have the greatest advantage of familiarity with digital technology, are encouraged to allow themselves the benefit of building evidence for their own legal cases if they suspect bad faith on the part of the police. Write your name, address, and the date on a paper or in a word processing app like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, a Notes app, and document the order of events you observe them in an escalated crime area. If it is written, sign the document. If it is typed, include your NIC number and the number of any government-issued ID you have. Document police officers' badge numbers. Take pictures and videos when you are in a safe distance to do so. Capture audio recordings of your interactions with police in an escalated crime area. If you can, send any evidence you have to a companion who you know would do you justice if you were to be incarcerated or killed. The absolution of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force from action, suit, and prosecution means that the citizens must take up the heavy mantle of documenting any actions done in bad faith by the police. And I hope that those listening grasp the gravity of the situation and prepare themselves accordingly. Madam President, we never know what could happen in an area of escalated crime. Sometimes family members, especially children, get sick or injured at the most utterly inconvenient times. So having a means of communication with the Royal St. Lucia Police Force for supporting getting permission to leave one's house or community in a timely manner is necessary to deal with personal or familial emergency. This is pursuant to a few initiatives such as the anonymous reporting hotline. So the
Excuse me. Ifa, Independent Senator.
Yes, good morning, esteemed colleagues. I'd like to correct Senator Albert on a point of order. When a police officer commits an incorrect act, they can send it to members of family, but I think it would have been important to mention that they can send it to the police complaints unit.
I understand, Ifa, but can we allow the leader of government business to finish his presentation? When
Yes.
it's your turn to speak, you can bring it up. Thank you.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
This is pursuant to the few initiatives such as the anonymous reporting hotline, so the government is certain it is doable by the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Access needs to be considered. Texting channels do not diminish prepaid minutes. Text or email channels that could be supported by Wi-Fi and the telephone channel. We must not have our people feeling the sense that they are beside when the community is designated an escalated crime area. Therefore, the government intends to step in collaboration with the Royal St. Lucia Police Force and our telecommunications providers to ensure robust and universally acceptable communications channels are created and efficiently manned for utmost efficacy in such a frankly uncertain and volatile condition as being in an area of escalated crime. As for the press, we understand that there is a balance to be kept in keeping police intelligence under lock and key, while giving citizens, the majority of whom are not criminals causing escalated crime, the benefit of transparency, understanding Royal St. Lucia Police Force and government action. Therefore, while it is not something I could specifically advise on, I hope to begin conceptualizing the best means that citizens and the government could remain for the most part of the same page. Madam President, this government intends to police compassionately, knowing that by invoking this bill by designating an escalated crime area, no action, suit, or prosecution or proceeding may be taken against an officer. This government hopes to police compassionately. We hope, in addition to this bill, to formulate a national insurance policy that meets the fundamental needs of the economic dependence of each person incarcerated, disabled, or killed by the police during operations conducted in an escalated crime area. We know that these persons in some instances are bread earners, and we recognize the value that they would add to their families if circumstances didn't determine that their economic value be diminished or altogether removed by incarceration, disablement, or killing by the police. The government does not want to be factious about the cost families will definitely bear with these operations are carried out. For dependents who are children, the government will absorb the cost of them attending and completing secondary school, including the cost of school books and uniform. They will receive a stipend for food, and their household will be considered favorably should they meet requirements for public housing and government bursaries and scholarships. For dependents who are elderly and or disabled, the government will assume the costs that were previously borne by the person who was incarcerated, disabled, or killed, or ensure these persons are favorably considered for other elderly care government programs. Inspired by the Prime Minister, Honorable Philippe J. Pierre, Commentary on the Youth Economy Agency in 2023, if this seems like a waste of money, then you can show that it is better waste than what it costs to keep on incarcerating, disabling, or killing persons entrapped in the cycle of poverty and violent crime. Not to mention the economic strain that violent crime place on the healthcare sector has been laminated by CARICOM, head of state. Furthermore, Madam President, crime and escalated crime is not. It should not be a political football. We could advocate, we could morally persuade, we can bargain all we want. But there are those in our midst, and perhaps others yet to come, who absolutely will not hear because, well, anything for political mileage. That's some political agenda, unfortunately. Against that background, we know that if it was not being done already, and it is but professionals, proprietors, and politicians who profit or even seek to profit from the terror of our people must ease and desist. It is not good for our mental health and more related to this bill. Widespread fear and panic is a criterion for escalated crime. The government recognizes that the emergence or existence of widespread fear of crime does not mean this is caused by the crimes or criminals themselves, but may be amplified by such institutions as the media. We recognize the correlation does not equate to causation. As if left unmitigated, the media can be weaponized to bring the designation of escalated crime area upon community or constituency. As such, the televising of any organs or tissue of homicide victim must be stopped. The televising of the victims' families, murders most often experiencing emotional breakdowns. Their screaming, bawling, pleading must be stopped. The televising of reprisal threats must be stopped. The death, the corpse, the pain, and suffering of the most vulnerable St. Lucians is not intellectual property. It is not a product, and it is not to be commodified. And this must be legislated, perhaps not in this bill, but in another future. I personally believe in the right to free speech and freedom of the press, but not in anyone's freedom to propagandize the grave and regrettable realities of any people of St. Lucia, not now and never in the future. Informal media, social media must be reined in as well, eventually but expeditiously. One woman whose brother was killed some years ago was sent a video of his corpse at the scene. No sooner did she have an anxiety attack at work and had to be sent home to recollect herself while dealing with this family crisis. If this is what our local viewership wants to see, we might as well be no less bloodthirsty than the killers themselves. And I know that that is not the case. I believe in our humanity. So let us come to this simple agreement today. The victims and their families, the citizens of St. Lucia, deserve better, more discreet media representation. In conclusion, I urge my fellow colleagues to support this bill and continue listening to the voices of St. Lucia. Let us work together to make the vision reality. Thank you.
Before we continue, I'd like everybody in the house to put their cell phones on silent or put it off, please. Thank you. Senators, the question is that the suppression of the escalated crime police powers bill be read a second time. Senator Leon.
Good morning, everyone. I rise today to express my firm opposition to the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Act. While I acknowledge the need to address crime and to ensure safety of our citizens, I cannot in good conscience support a piece of legislation that grants sweeping and unchecked powers to law enforcement, which will risk the erosion of democratic freedoms and threatens the very principles of justice and human rights upon this nation stands for. And whilst I continue my speech, I'd like you all to remember that St. Lucia is a democratic country. This bill places an extraordinary amount of power in the hands of the Minister of National Security and the Commissioner of Police. Under Section 5, the Minister, in consultation with the Police Commissioner, may designate an area an escalated crime zone. This vague term allows an entire town to be labeled an escalated crime area. The lack of independent oversight is alarming. This effect places unchecked powers in the hands of individuals, which is a dangerous precedent in any democracy. Madam President, this act grants police powers that verge on martial law. Let us examine Section 7 through 11. The power to stop and detain individuals without cause, the power to block roads and set up cordons restricting movement, the power to enter and occupy land or buildings without a warrant, and the power to close premises, including businesses and homes. These provisions erode fundamental rights of movement, private property, and due process. We are effectively legalizing warrantless searches and indefinite detentions under the guise of crime prevention. And as I may add, Madam President, about 2 years ago, there was a crime in my community. About 5 hours after the crime was committed, the way to my home was blocked. I had to go out that night and I could not leave my house because the police officers were not allowing me to. But perhaps the most concerning provision is Section 19, which allows police to detain individuals for up to 144 hours or 6 full days without charge. Worse still, this period can be extended by a judge for an ex parte application, meaning the accused does not even have the right to defend themselves. This is a clear violation of due process. Our legal system is based on the presumption of innocence, yet this law flips the principles on its head, allowing individuals to be detained on mere suspicion, without evidence, and without immediate judicial insight. Madam President, we must ask ourselves, who will brunt the bear of these laws? History has shown that emergency powers, such as unfairly burdened marginalized communities, poorer neighborhoods, youth, and individuals already facing discriminations, will likely be the primary targets. Without accountability mechanisms, this act can and will be misused against innocent citizens, political opponents, and activists under the guise of public safety. Now, we all know in St. Lucia how police officers abuse their power. Furthermore, Section 14 provides blanket immunity to police officers acting in good faith. But who defines good faith? How do we hold law enforcement accountable for potential abuses of power, wrongful arrest, or excessive force? This act creates an environment where misconduct goes unchecked. This bill also threatens the livelihood of countless citizens. Section 13 gives the police power to close businesses, including nightclubs, restaurants, and entertainment venues, for up to 48 hours without explanation. Extended closures require approval only from a senior police officer and not the courts. This provision will harm legitimate businesses, deter investment, and create an atmosphere of uncertainty. Instead of strengthening our economy, this act risks further economic decline by placing businesses at the mercy of police actions. And also, Madam President, I would like to add, last year there was a killing at the Derrick Walker Square, which is the heart of Castries. As much as now we appreciate that there are a lot of police officers in the city of Castries. However, yesterday listening to the lower house, the minister said that the motto of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force is to serve and protect. But are they really serving and protecting us to this day? You know, yesterday or the day before, they gave statistics of the amount of tickets they've given, the amount of vehicles they possessed. But how about they give us the statistics of the solved crimes of St. Lucia? This is what the people of St. Lucia are interested in. We're not interested in the amount of tickets you give out daily. But however, as some of you may know, I'm an active sports person. And as we know, sports is one of the most effective and engaging youth, promoting discipline and deterring criminal activity. Many young people who might be vulnerable to gang influences or crime turn to sports for a source of hope, structure, and development and personal development. However, the designation of an escalated crime area under Section 5 of this Act can lead to disruptions in communities' programs, training sessions, and major sporting events. If stadiums, fields, or community centers are closed due to security concerns, young athletes can lose access to safe spaces where they can develop their talents and avoid negative influences. As we all know, St. Lucia has been striving to establish itself as a hub for regional and international sporting events. The successful hosting of tournaments in football, cricket, athletics, and other sporting disciplines contributes significantly to our tourism industry. However, Section 13 of the Act, which grants police officers the power to close places of public resort and entertainment, raises concerns about the ability to host sporting events in areas affected by escalated crime. If law enforcement authorities deem an area unsafe, they may shut down sporting venues, leading to financial losses for event organizers, sponsors, and local businesses that benefit from sports tourism. Section 7 and 8 provide the power to stop persons and block roads within escalated crime areas. This could disrupt training schedules for athletes who need to travel to and from stadiums, gyms, or competitions. Athletes, coaches, and support staff may find themselves unable to facilitate or face delays due to security checkpoints. Such disruptions could severely impact athlete performance, particularly those training for international competitions. Section 19 of the Act permits the detention of persons suspected of involvement in escalated crime to be detained for up to 144 hours, with the possibility of extension. While this is intended to target criminal activity, there is a risk of wrongful detentions, particularly for young athletes living in affected areas. Many sports teams travel in groups and sometimes train late into the evening, which could lead to misunderstandings with law enforcement. If young athletes are detained without immediate cause, their careers and reputations could suffer irreparable harm. Madam President, we all know crime is a serious issue, but heavy-handed policing is not the solution. We must address the root causes of crime, poverty, unemployment, lack of educational opportunities, and social dispowerment. Now, I'll not stand here today and criticize this bill and not give solutions. So rather than criminalizing communities, let us invest in community policing programs that could build trust between law enforcement and citizens, youth development initiatives that provide alternatives to crime, judicial reforms to ensure swift but fair justice, and social services that tackle drug abuse, mental health issues, and domestic violence. In conclusion, Madam President, this bill does not make us safer. It places far too much unchecked power in the hands of the executive of law enforcement and undermines civil liberties and will risk widespread abuse. A government's responsibility is not just to protect its citizens from crime, but also to safeguard their rights and their freedom. This legislation, under the pretext of security, does the opposite. It strips away freedom, diminishes democracy, and normalizes authoritarian practices. And before I end, I'd like to urge the people of St. Lucia that we need to be better. Because if we were better, the young people of today will not be in this house to debate this piece of legislation. I urge this house to review the Suppression of Escalated Crime Act. Instead, let us work together on a crime strategy that upholds justice, protects human rights, and fosters a fairer, safer St. Lucia for all. Thank you.
Senator Glasgow. No podiums today.
Madam President, esteemed colleagues, I rise today as Independent Senator Ethan Carlton Glasgow to express my profound concerns regarding the constitutionality of the Suppression of Escalated Crime Police Powers Act of 2023. While I, like every member of this Senate, recognize the importance of addressing crime, this legislation in its current form presents serious threats to the fundamental rights and freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution of St. Lucia. Madam President, therefore, I cannot support this motion without significant and necessary amendments. My primary concern stems from the very real potential for this act to infringe upon several fundamental rights that are protected by our Constitution. It is our duty to uphold these rights, and I believe this act in its current form falls short of that duty. Madam President, first and foremost, the Act grants police officers the power to prohibit, conditionally or absolutely, the possession of firearms, ammunition, and explosives within an escalated crime area. This power, while seemingly targeted, could lead to restrictions on the freedom of movement, including the right to reside in any part of St. Lucia. Madam President, such restrictions may be overly broad or disproportionately applied, potentially violating Section 12 of our Constitution. While restrictions are indeed allowed in the interests of public safety or order, they are supposed to be, to quote our Constitution, reasonably justifiable in a democratic society, a condition which I believe this Act fails to meet due to the broad nature of these powers. Secondly, the broad powers granted to police to control public spaces within these so-called escalated crime areas could also unduly restrict the freedom of assembly and association, which is guaranteed under Section 11 of our Constitution. Legitimate gatherings may be disrupted or even prevented under the guise of crime prevention. This is a worrying prospect for any democracy. Madam President, while not explicitly stated in this Act, the broad powers given to police officers could easily lead to arbitrary detentions and searches, especially if the escalated crime areas are loosely defined. Section 3 of our Constitution, as we all know, protects against arbitrary arrest and detention, and this Act's implementation must be carefully scrutinized to prevent such violations. Furthermore, we must consider the impact on the right to a fair trial. The Act's potential to create an environment where individual rights are easily overlooked is deeply concerning, especially given that Section 8 of our Constitution guarantees the right to a fair trial. Any provision which inhibits this fundamental right is a matter of the gravest concern. Madam President, in addition to these concerns about fundamental rights, this Act also gives significant powers to police officers above the rank of inspector. While empowering law enforcement is of course crucial, the lack of sufficient checks and balances is deeply troubling. The Act does not clearly specify the criteria that determine an escalated crime area, leaving room for arbitrary designation and thus arbitrary imposition of restrictions. Madam President, our laws must be precise, and this discretion afforded to police officers must be clearly defined to protect individuals from potential abuse. Moreover, Section 18, paragraph 1 of this Act makes it an offense to, and I quote, assault, obstruct, hinder, resist, or use any threatening, abusive, or calumnious language to or aid or incite any other person to assault, obstruct, hinder, or resist a police officer in the execution of his or her duty under the Act. This is overly broad and could easily be used to silence dissent or critical opinions about police actions, infringing on freedom of expression as outlined in Section 10 of our Constitution. Madam President, while this Act mandates that a written report be submitted to the Minister after an inquiry, this measure is clearly insufficient to safeguard fundamental rights. A more robust system of judicial oversight is needed and necessary to ensure that the powers granted under this Act are not used to violate the rights of our citizens. Madam President, the economic benefits of enhanced public safety as well as the need to protect civil liberties are both of utmost importance. It is my firm belief that this Act fails to strike a proper balance and could potentially weaken the very foundations of our democracy. Madam President, I therefore urge all members of this Senate to reconsider their support for this act and call for meaningful and comprehensive amendments. We must ensure that any measure to tackle crime upholds the sanctity of our Constitution and protects the rights and freedoms of all citizens. Our dedication to a secure St. Lucia should not, and indeed must not, come at the cost of our fundamental freedoms. I therefore propose that this act is in its current form unconstitutional. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Mooney.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, members of the Senate, individuals present in the House today, and my dear residents of Vieux-Fort South, St. Lucians viewing via the live stream, good morning. Bienvenue tout le monde. Bienvenue tout le monde. Okay, I am Chrisanne Mooney, and while it is freezing cold in the house today and every other day, I rise with a fire that refuses to be extinguished. A fire fueled by the cries of our people, the anguish of our mothers, and the silent cries of a generation forsaken. Vieux-Fort bleeds, Madam President. Our young men and women are caught in a vicious cycle of crime, not because they are inherently violent, but because we, as a society, have failed them. We have neglected to provide them with opportunities, guidance, and a sense of purpose. Madam President, if we truly wish to combat crime, then we must implement proactive measures rather than temporary, ineffective, discriminatory, reactive ones. Confront the root cause, the lack of investment in our youth. We must create safe spaces where young people can dream beyond the streets, beyond survival. We need initiatives, mentorship initiatives, we need skill development programs, and a structured environment where our young people can thrive. We cannot continue to treat them as an afterthought and feign shock when they turn to the only path they believe is open to them. In the words of Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. When we look at what has taken place in Antigua and Barbuda, when the government noticed there was an uptick in youth violence, they met with the leaders of these criminal entities and not merely called a truce, but they went a step further to provide the young men with a sustainable, legal source of income. They helped them open a business to sell eggs. I see no reason something similar cannot be done in St. Lucia to convert our young people into productive members of our workforce. We need to flood Vieux-Fort with opportunity, not fear. Where are the youth centers, the after-school programs, the trained schools? Where are the initiatives to tell our young people that they are valued, that we care about them? We cannot allow the streets to be their only teachers, Madam President, because if we do, the lesson will be one of violence, hopelessness, and despair. One might argue that we have NSDC and NELU, but when we take a look into the cost, it is beyond obvious why our young people do not take advantage of these opportunities. Furthermore, I can say from personal experience that I tried to take a course in cake baking and decorating. It's my hobby. But I discovered it was only being offered in busy castries when NSDC is no more than 5 minutes away from my home in Vieux-Fort. This is unacceptable. We can do the math together. Larishes to Vieux-Fort, $1.25. Vieux-Fort to Castries, $9. Castries to BC, another $1.25. Total that is $12.50 multiplied by 2 to get back to my house. $25. 1 week, $125. 4 weeks, 1 month, $500. Being from Vieux-Fort and traveling to and from Castries with no job in addition to payment of the cost would certainly do more harm than good. One might say you can work and take the course at the same time, but when most jobs have hours that run from 8 to 4, 9 to 5, it is just not possible for me to be in NSDC in busy Castries at 5 p.m., which is when the course starts. Madam President, allow me to also point out the lack of investment into the once vibrant football community in Vieux-Fort. Vieux-Fort has several football groups, yet there is no tournament being actively held in Vieux-Fort. where we have Philip Maslegrand sitting idle. Black hat football was a thing in Vieux-Fort. The t-shirt I bought has already turned into a 90. Let me also take the time out to pay my respects to Mr. Emmanuel Belas, who was one of the biggest stakeholders in the football community, both in Vieux-Fort and nationally. Someone very dear to my heart as a Vieux-Fort Comprehensive Secondary School alum. Lastly, we need to ensure that we invest in individuals and groups meant to affect change in our communities. Take, for instance, the absence of a youth worker in Vieux-Fort since mid-2024. I applied, was interviewed for, and was offered the position. But I had no choice but to turn it down when I discovered that the monthly salary was only $1,700, $100 of which accounts for transportation allowance, and as we discussed previously, it costs roughly $25 a day for myself or anyone residing in Vieux-Fort to get to and Castries. While the salary is above minimum wage, I do not believe the pay is satisfactory for any educated young person, especially one expected to shoulder such a great responsibility. If this is the financial compensation available to me, I must admit that I too might turn to an illicit source. Additionally, as the Secretary of the Vieux-Fort South Youth and Sports Council since February of 2023, I can attest that we have been without a space of our own for all this time and have only now been granted access to one. I say that to say, if we want change, we must be willing to facilitate it. I believe this is what my President Barack Obama meant when he said, investing in young people isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. You cannot convince me that we are serious about improving the situation in Vieux-Fort when we have made no additional efforts to ensure that the persons responsible for youth are connected and well-resourced. Madam President, let us stop the empty rhetoric and take action. In 2023, I traveled to St. Kitts to represent St. Lucia, debating what? Youth violence. And here we are again, talking about youth violence. Violence has always existed, it will always exist. Cain killed Abel and we're still here. Let us invest in sports, in entrepreneurship, and in technical and vocational training. Let us provide pathways for legal and sustainable employment. Let us not wait until more young lives are lost before we decide to move. The time is now. To government officials, I say, the time is now. To lawmakers in St. Lucia, I say, the time is now. To community leaders, I say, the time is now. And to the young people in St. Lucia, I say, the time is now. Education is the passport for the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm X said that. Young people, we need to take opportunities as they present themselves to us. I urge this body, this government, and this nation to wake up. The youth are watching and they are waiting. As Kofi Annan once said, a society that cuts off from its youth severs its lifeline. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Alexander.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to be in this august chamber this morning. Allow me to begin with this quote by Martin Luther King, and I quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." There is often this misguided belief that crime only affects criminals and their families. This reflects a dangerous complacency among us as St. Lucians. Why intervene? Let the criminals kill each other. But haven't we been proven wrong time after time? Innocent lives being taken, children caught in the crossfires. Crime is at our very doorsteps, yet we prefer to be reactive rather than proactive. It is almost normal now, a dangerous new reality. You don't believe me? Let me paint you a little picture. Your hands are shaking. Your legs feel numb. You can hear the clock above the classroom. Tick, tock, tick, tock, as the first gunshot is heard. Maybe some criminal killing another one. What matters though is that you can hear it. What matters is the children in the classroom struggling to find safety. What matters is that teacher who is in front of the class, fear gripping her as her voice shakes and her knees tremble. Sounds like a movie, right? This was my experience as a student. Zot pasav ki benye kasati, pou ni chewa pieu. Pou kite kay mama pou apon, me ou pasav mem di sa teacher di jodi ale ou kite. There are individuals who have been through so much worse, and I empathize with them. And it is for this reason I am in support of this bill. As a young person, I am distinctly aware of how crime affects those involved and innocent alike. And I believe it is crucial to protect our people. Statistics highlight the urgency of this situation. According to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, in an interview in 2024, serious crime increased from 1,643 cases in 2023 to 1,699 cases in 2024, a 3.4% increase of 56 serious crimes. But for individuals in crime-ravaged areas, it isn't just a statistical issue, but a personal one as well. It threatens their safety and well-being. But I believe protection of the innocent isn't just a societal duty, but a moral duty as well. Proverbs chapter 31 verses 8 to 9 advocates for authorities to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute, judge fairly, and defend the rights of the poor and needy. And before my opposition can ask, who are the vulnerable or the poor and needy in this situation? Let me ask you a question. When Miss Mary Radcliffe was killed in her garden, was that perpetrator vulnerable? When the individuals were killed in Industries Roselle, were those perpetrators vulnerable? When Miss Valerie Lord was raped and killed, were those perpetrators vulnerable? But as a senator, it would be hypocritical of me if I did not admit that there are a few things that need to be changed in this bill. First and foremost, better accountability needs to be put in place for officers, and more emphasis needs to be placed on the regulatory boards guiding these officers. This is to ensure that not only do they do their jobs effectively, but uphold a moral and ethical compass. Secondly, mandatory training for police officers assigned to escalated crime areas, especially regarding the mentally unstable, needs to be made more clear in this bill. The absence of specific instructions on this matter raises both ethical and practical concerns. As we know, mentally unstable individuals will not take well to the traditional communication methods that we would have. So the docility and compliance police officers may expect may not always be the case. And Mahatma Gandhi expresses it perfectly when he says, the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And just to be clear, I am speaking about vulnerable members in the case of the mentally unstable in this context. I will go further to say, this bill is for us all, and it cannot be so if it does not take into account these vulnerable individuals. And finally, non-lethal forms of detainment need to be more practiced and made explicitly clear in the bill. As we have all heard, the motto of the police force is to protect and to serve. And in order to ensure this, restraint and detainment is key. Crime is an issue that should not be taken lightly. And it is for this reason I am appalled that individuals would sit here today and oppose this bill. And the recommendations, if any, were given are mediocre at best, because the government has already covered a lot of that in their speeches. As you have heard from my other colleagues, a number of countries have attempted to put in various initiatives into place. And an example of this is the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organizations Act in Jamaica and the Anti-Gang Act in Trinidad. Although these focus on gangs specifically, there are striking similarities to the suppression of escalated crime bill we want to establish. And of course, human rights violations are concerning any one of them. But where we have the advantage is the specificity of our bill. And Senator Glasgow stood here and said our bill is not specific. I urge you to rethink that statement, sir. Our bill is extremely specific because not only does our bill clearly state what an escalated crime area is and the boundaries for such areas, it also states the powers police have to ensure abuse of power is minimal. Take a moment to go to Part 2, Section 14 of the bill, page 57, entitled Protection of Police Officers. And I read, no action, suit, prosecution or other proceeding shall be brought or instituted against a police officer in respect to any act done in good faith in the exercise or purported exercise of his or her functions for the public safety, restoration of order, or the preservation of peace in an escalated crime area, or otherwise in the public interest. I want us to look at two words: good faith. Good faith occurs when an officer reasonably believes they were acting within the law when conducting a search, seizure, or arrest, even if later determined to be mistaken. Intention is crucial here. This one term allows for the continual protection of human rights and accountability for police officers. For example, in the case of flagrant misconduct. Flagrant misconduct refers to the blatant violation of police policies or the law, often involving excessive force, blatant disregard for someone's rights, or a clear abuse of authority, even if the police officer believed they were acting within the law. I want to applaud my government for taking the initiatives necessary with this bill. It shows true dedication to our people that mediocrity will not be tolerated in this cabinet. We will do everything in our power to ensure that our people are always put first. As I end, I want to reiterate that I believe this bill is a much needed initiative. And to you, my opposition, I want to say to you, if you're not helping to make it right, stop complaining about it being wrong. Or better yet, I think I prefer my version even more. If you cannot give meaningful recommendations to an already pre-coded solution, then respectfully, your presence in this honorable house holds very little meaning. It is a testament as to why my government is in power. Since we have to do your jobs for you anyways, it is our job to ensure that our citizens feel safe and protected. And I believe this bill is the first step in ensuring this. Thank you.
Senator Faisal.
Madam President, honorable senators, viewers both here and online, to the opposition who today must decide whether they stand with the people or with the criminals, good morning. Let me be absolutely clear. This is not just a bill. This is a battle for every survival of our nation. This is about whether we reclaim our streets or surrender to the lawlessness. It's about whether the people of St. Lucia can sleep in peace or live in fear. And today, right now, every single person in this chamber must choose a side. St. Lucia, our paradise is under siege. Our economy, our communities, and our very way of life are being threatened by crime that has spiraled out of control. Tourism, the backbone of our economy, is already feeling the terrors. According to an article published by the Ministry of Tourism, and I quote, in 2023, we welcomed along over 1.2 million visitors, generating billions for our economy and providing employment for thousands of St. Lucians, end quote. Yet, what happens when crime headlines in our beaches? What happens when travel advisories warn visitors to stay locked inside their resorts? The answer is simple. We lose jobs, jobs disappear, business closes, families suffer, and all because some in this chamber would rather defend the rights of criminals than defend the livelihood of our people. And let's not pretend. This is just not about tourism. St. Lucia themselves are under attack. Last year, violent crime surged to levels that should make every single one of us run in our rooms. Murders, armed robbers, gang warfare. This is the new reality that our citizens face daily. And yet, what do we hear from the opposition? Complaints about rights and police outreach. Rights? Through you, Madam President, let me ask the opposition, Where were you when concerns for rights, when families had to flee their homes because criminals had taken control of their communities? Where was the outrage when business owners were forced to shut down, not because of economic struggles, but because they were paying criminals more in protection fees than they made in profit? Where was your voice when parents had to look over their shoulders whilst walking their children to school? I heard the opposition whispering the usual objections, mumbling about police abuse and outstage overreach. Tell me, what is more dangerous? A police force with the tools to fight crime, or criminals who currently operate without fear, knowing full well they will not face the real consequences? What is the oppressive? Giving law enforcement the power to act, or allowing criminals to turn our nation into a war zone while the chamber argues about technicalities? This bill is not about talk. It is about action. It designates crime hotspots and brings the full force of law upon them. It allows police to block roads and to cut escape routes for criminals. It authorizes the closure of businesses that enable crime, because we all know some so-called establishments serve more than drinks. It strengthens firearm control, because no gang should ever be more heavily armed than our police. There are no radical measures. These are tools that every serious government must use to protect its people. But of course, the opposition will say we need long-term solutions, more social programs, more education. And yes, Madam President, long-term solutions matter. But tell me what? Programs can rehabilitate a man who has already decided to kill? What scholarship will make a gang leader certainly choose peace over profit? What opportunity can fix a bullet hole? So I ask the opposition, what is your solution? Because I'll tell you what won't work. Complaining, hoping, tweeting, writing long reports while criminals write the rules. These things won't save St. Lucia. This bill will. And so, Madam President, to my colleagues across the aisle, I say, if you vote against this bill, be prepared to explain your decision. Go to the grieving mothers and tell her why her son's killer still walks free. Go to the business owner and justify why his store was robbed yet again. Go to the young St. Lucian hoping to build a future in tourism, and why you let crime threaten the industry that could have given them a job. The people of St. Lucia are watching. They are watching to see who stands with them and who stands in their way. They are watching to see who has the courage to act and who prefers to cover behind excuses. They are watching to see who is serious about crime and who is serious about fighting this government. Madam President, we have reached the line in the sand. Either we fight for St. Lucia or we let criminals win. Either we act now or we watch our nation crumble. This government chooses action. This government chooses protection. This government chooses the people of St. Lucia. And so, I do not just vote for this bill, I vote for every St. Lucian who has suffered at the hands of crime. I vote for the business owners, the students, the tourists, the taxi drivers, the family who deserves to live in a country where they feel safe. And I challenge every member of this chamber to do the same. The time for talking is over. The time for action is now. Let us act. Let us lead. Let us take back our country. Madam President, I rest my case.
Senator Batiste.
Thank you, Madam President. I bid you all a pleasant Good morning. I rise today from my honorable seat to address a matter that is of great importance to St. Lucia, the suppression of escalated crime police powers. This proposed bill raises significant concerns about its potential impact on our beloved island nation, St. Lucia, as it regards to our international reputation, diplomatic relations, and our ability to attract foreign investments. It is our responsibility to ensure that while we address domestic security, we do not undermine the very principles that define us as a nation. Firstly, let us discuss our international reputation. In today's interconnected world, every decision we make sends a message beyond our shores. While I understand that the bill aims to curb escalated crime, expanding police powers in the way that is proposed by this bill could be perceived as excessive or even as violating human rights. If that happens, we risk being seen as a nation that does not uphold the rule of law or respect individual freedoms. These are values we have worked hard to build and maintain over decades of diplomacy. Madam Speaker, we need to think about how our relationships with other countries can be weakened. St. Lucia relies on mutual trust and respect in our bilateral and international partnerships. If law enforcement is granted extensive powers without proper oversight, it could lead to accusations of overreach or even abuse. Such perceptions might strain our relationships with allies and trade partners. And let us be honest, when trust is eroded, it is not just politics that suffer. Trade agreements, security collaborations, and cultural exchanges could all be put at risk, weakening our global standing. Foreign investments. Investors want stability, predictability, and a strong commitment to the rule of law. If this bill is passed without adequate safeguards, it could signal political and legal instability. That kind of uncertainty can make investors hesitate, especially those looking to contribute to industries like tourism, infrastructure, and commerce. Without those investments, our economy could face challenges that hurt us all. Speaking of tourism, this is critical for us. St. Lucia's beauty, culture, and hospitality make us a sought-after destination. But let us think of Clause 13 of this bill. It gives broad powers to close public establishments and control entertainment venues. This could disrupt the very activities that draw visitors here. Imagine tourists hearing about frequent or unpredictable closures. It surely won't inspire confidence. And for those considering investing in our tourism sector, this kind of uncertainty could be a deal breaker. Let us be clear. Tourism is the lifeblood of our economy. It contributes significantly to our gross domestic product and provides jobs for thousands of St. Lucians. This bill, as it stands, risks undermining a sector we cannot afford to jeopardize. So to close, Madam Speaker, I would like to emphasize that the goals of the suppression of escalated crime police powers, they are noble, and I believe we all want to address crime effectively. But we cannot ignore the potential cost on our international reputation, our partnerships, and our economic future. I urge this Parliament to take a step back, reconsider the bill in its current form, and explore solutions that strike the right balance between security and preserving St. Lucia's standing on the global stage. Let us ensure that the policies we create today, they honor our commitment to human rights, international cooperation, and sustainable development. This is how we protect not just our present, but also the future we're building for generations to come. I thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, while we sat earlier and listened to the concerns of the opposition, talking about police abusing their powers, talking about all these things. But let me remind you that the bill, hold on. Hold on a minute, excuse me. Oh gosh, I died. Oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh. Okay. Crime affects us worse than this bill will, right? Crime also affects foreign investment, our relationships with other countries. The relationship is already affected by crime. Stability is out of the way with regards to crime. Tourism is already affected. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the suspension of escalated crime police powers bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many are of the opinion, say aye. As many as of the contrary, say no. I think the noes have it. I think the noes have it. The noes have it. She has, oh yes.
An act to provide police officers with additional powers for the suppression of escalated crime and for related matters.
Senators, the bill has been failed. The sitting is adjourned.
Get them interested in national development. Let us show that our youth understand the development of this country and ensure that they continue to participate in discussions like this. So thank you for tuning in. We do hope that you have a wonderful day. This is the conclusion for the first sitting of Youth Parliament for the year 2025. Thank you and do have yourself a wonderful, blessed and enriching year until we return for our next sitting of this magnificent youth session. Thank you.
South, please stand. Mr. Chairman, we are going to require your services again.